Okay, so human behaviour. Certainly over the last few years, there's been a lot of attention given to the topic of behavioural economics, behaviour change, however you want to term it, and there's been lots of experts, lots of books written, showing how an understanding of human behaviour can be used to change the choices that people make. And John Kieran's paper this morning also talked a lot about how clients and agencies are still not fully embracing behaviour change theories and actually are not changing their own behaviour. And there's certainly some truth in that. We know clients like their metrics, they like their norms, they like their KPIs. And I think as long as those are tied to performance and give people reassurance, that's not going to change too quickly in the future. So the approach we've taken to behaviour change is to basically use it as a lens and as an overlay rather than necessarily a completely separate discipline. So in this way, our clients still have the type of data they're used to, but what we're trying to do is give them a different way of looking at the data and another input to the challenges they're facing. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about some of the basic principles of behaviour change and how we use them. And apologies if some of this is not new. I realise lots may have been talked about the last few days. But hopefully it can bring it together in a way that's useful to you. Okay, so at the heart of this is the fact, or the simple fact, that we're not robots. And our decision-making isn't always logical. Our brains don't often have the processing power, or we don't have the time or the tools to look at each choice in our lives and calculate which option to take. So as a result, we don't act rationally, and we do things that probably aren't in our best interest. And as we can see here, these are three, I guess, classic examples from government and social policy areas where behaviour change is an issue. So, for example, we all know the medical evidence around alcohol, yet I'm sure even while we've been here these last few days, some of us have overindulged. There's extraordinarily high proportions of people who don't take a full course of medicine that they've been prescribed. And we've also seen a lot over the last few years of people spending money they don't have rather than saving for the future. So all things that tax governments and policymakers. And there's certainly areas where governments over the years have spent millions on advertising and communication campaigns. But actually what behavioural economics gave them was just a different way of looking at the problems. So it gave them the license to perhaps change the environment or actually start intervening rather than just trying to communicate. So a classic example here, certainly in Ireland some years ago, was plastic bag tax. And now in most supermarkets, certainly in Ireland and in the UK, we have to pay for the plastic bags we get in supermarkets. And as a result, millions less are sent to landfill. But that's government and social policy. Let's think a little bit about how we can apply these in the commercial world and actually celebrate the fact that we're irrational. I mean, we don't obey logic, we've seen that, and while that's sort of frustrating and could be challenging, it's actually what makes us interesting, and I think if we're honest, it's actually what keeps us in a job. Because if we were all robots, all that companies would need to do was to invent the best product, tell everyone it was the best product, and we'd all go and buy it, and that's it, job done. But that's not how it is. And our jobs rely on us answering these questions that are related to human behaviour. So why are we wedded to certain brands when better alternatives exist? What stops us adopting these behaviours that should clearly benefit us? A lot of what we do involves a choice, and that's part of where the irrationality comes in. And actually, we're constantly having to make choices. So if I think about when I go to the supermarket to buy baked beans, it's one of the items on my list. I go to the aisle, Heinz is usually there, there's probably 3 or 4 other brands. My usual behaviour is just to simply pick up Heinz. It's my default. It's still a choice I have to make. I still have to pick up my hand, put it into the trolley. It's subconscious, but it had to start somewhere. And that somewhere started when I first had to start shopping for myself, which was a bit of a scary experience, I must admit. But the first time I bought beans, I bought Heinz because that's what I had as a child. It's what my mum bought. I also knew at the time it was one of the biggest brands, and I'd tried others and didn't like them. So over time, Heinz became my default. It was an easy choice, but I'm still making that choice every time I buy it. Now, what we've just described, and I know it was mentioned this morning, is one of the key principles of behavioural economics, which is System 1 versus System 2 thinking. Me buying the beans is very much classic System 1. It's unconscious, it's automatic, it's effortless. Now, it might be being harsh to say that we're lazy, but the truth is, because we have so many decisions to make in our lives, we often take the shortcuts. So my shortcut with beans is just to do exactly the same thing. Nothing's jolted me out of that behaviour, I'm happy. And that might change. For example, I might have my income halved. That would actually force me into making a choice. That's where I might employ System 2 decision making. System 2 being slow, deliberate, effortful. It's the point where I might sit in front of a shelf of baked beans, which doesn't sound like a great way to spend an afternoon, but I might look at the price, I might look at the quality, I might think about the flavour and what I know, and then make a new choice, make a slow, deliberate choice. Having made that choice, I may then just carry on with my System 1 thinking and carry on making very instinctive choices. Now, I've just talked about them very separately, but the reality is System 1 and System 2 are present in all the decisions we make. As John mentioned this morning, System 1 is certainly the dominant one. We do a lot of the things time after time because we get comfortable with the choices we make, we get comfortable with the brands, and we don't want to spend time reassessing those choices. But System 2 is always there, it's always in the background, even if it's passive, but we'll continue to make our System 1 choices until something contradicts that. Helen's now going to talk about some of the ways that things can change and what we can do to influence those changes.
I'm going to try this microphone. Okay, it works. Okay, so whilst our natural inclination is to live our lives in System 1 mode, there are distinct events that can jolt us out of this behaviour, and we call these moments of truth. Now, moments of truth work by creating dissonance between our System 1 and our System 2 modes, so there's no longer that natural alignment that Kahneman refers to, and we're forced to reassess our behaviour. Now, some of these moments are life stage based, take having a baby for the first time or buying your first home, but they can also occur serendipitously. So, for example, the horse meat scandal that happened in the UK last year, it caused consumers who might have previously bought pre-made beef burgers without a second thought to suddenly question their behaviour. Now, moments of truth can also be generated by brands. A brand that comes to mind is the Natural Confectionery Company, which shook up the UK confectionery market by highlighting its natural ingredients as a core differentiator. Now, by focusing on the natural, the brand reframed the category, and consumers were caused to question the healthiness of their default sweet treat that they'd been previously buying. So in sum, marketers can either target life events like having a child, make the most of serendipitous events like a scandal or an exposé, or they can create inspiring moments of truth themselves through different levers such as on-pack communications, advertising, social media, and the retail environment, all to incite behaviour change. Okay. Another important factor in understanding consumer behaviour is appreciating the specific state that people will be in when they're actually making a decision. Now, whilst as humans we may all have the same basic wiring, we don't always behave in the same way. And we believe there are a number of key indicators that will impact on how we might behave in a given scenario. Familiarity with that scenario, knowledge of the category or sector, and that includes the brands that are in that sector, engagement with the category or sector, the recognised importance of making the right decision, and the recognised risk of getting that decision wrong. Now, how these variables interact can impact on whether we're likely to make a snap decision or a long, drawn-out, considered one, and whether we predominantly use our System 1 or our System 2 modes. So as an example, taking renewing our home insurance, if an individual finds the whole category boring, feels that there's a low risk of losing money if they don't switch providers, and feel that actually all insurance companies are the same anyway, then it's unlikely that they're going to spend a huge amount of time considering their alternatives and the different options that are out there. They're much more likely to opt for the System 1 behaviour of simply renewing with their existing provider. Okay. Now, regardless of what mode we're in, different factors will influence how we ultimately behave. And we broadly divide these into 3 influence types: cultural, environmental, and personal. So taking each of these 3 broad influence types one by one, and focusing first on cultural influences, cultural decisions encompass influences that are largely grounded in social and cultural norms. A classic example of this is deciding to wear a particular brand of clothing because it says something to other people about you, or it signifies that you belong to a particular social group. So that's grounded in a social norm. We might also use social norms, however, to help us make decisions, particularly in situations where we don't feel inclined or able to decide ourselves. So taking the example of what dishwasher tablet to buy, which is something that I have to say flummoxed me the first time I had to do it. In this case, we might opt for the most popular product, using the wisdom of the crowd to make the decision for us. The second broad type of influence is our personal decision-making tools. How we feel about a particular choice or behaviour is hugely influential on what we actually decide to do. Factors such as how emotionally engaged we are, how much effort we will need to exert, and what we will gain and lose as a result of that decision or behaviour can all influence our decision-making. Now, we call these factors personal decision-making tools, and although we don't always employ these tools consciously, they are present in almost every decision that we make. And companies recognise this. Take the price comparison website, for example. These work with our personal decision-making in a number of ways. First of all, they can make choices much less effortful, but they can also bring to the fore what is for a lot of people the most salient and easy to get benefit, cost saving. The final type of influence on our decision-making and behaviour is environmental cues. Now, much has been written about choice architecture and how we can subtly influence how people make decisions based on the presentation, placement, and positioning of different options. Retailers, and particularly supermarkets, are experts in changing our environments to alter our behaviour, as you might have found out yourselves. Supermarket aisles are often relocated so that consumers are forced to find their way around the store again and discover items that they may not have planned to buy in the process. End-of-aisle promotions for products that are unrelated to the aisles themselves, so for example multi-packs of crisps at the end of a washing detergent aisle, fulfil a similar role. The incongruity of that positioning brings to the consumer's attention items that in their default system 1 mode they might not have considered otherwise. So, those are the 3 broad influences on our behaviour, and now Mark's going to talk through an example of how, by taking all of the things I've just spoken into account, we can understand consumer decision-making better.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to just really try and bring this all together in an example, and here I'm looking at the sort of challenge Android had in trying to break Apple's dominance, and this is just a hypothetical example. And I guess typically when faced with this issue, we'd run a survey that would look at consumer perceptions of the 2 brands, so we'd measure a lot of attributes, we'd maybe also measure what was important to consumers, and that would be sort of, I guess, the bedrock of the research that we do and look at how people made choices. But the human behaviour lens has also taught us there are a number of other things we need to look into and to sort of build into our survey, and these are sort of these are 4 key ones that sort of apply in this case. So firstly, there's loss aversion. As consumers, we tend to feel losses more than we appreciate gains, and smartphone users have tons of apps, they have music, they have content, all of which they'd hate to lose or have problems sort of transferring. So what Android, in this case, needed to do was reassure consumers that they could get hold of the same apps, transfer music files, and suffer no loss as a result. Factoring that into research, we may want to measure how locked in consumers are to different operating systems and the extent to which they use apps and music, for example, in terms of within their smartphone. So it's putting the human side of it rather than just the performance of the 2 systems. Second area is self-efficacy, and one of the things that holds us back from making change is just our belief that we can do it. So Android here needed to give consumers reassurance that they could actually make that switch. And they may do that by having in-store experts or online tutorials to sort of get over that particular hurdle. And from a research point of view, we may want to look at how confident consumers are and how sort of comfortable they feel with setting up new technology. We've seen earlier around effort, we lean on our defaults, so we'd much rather carry on doing the same thing. And something Android may need to look at here is just ways that they can make that sort of switch effortless. Again, maybe putting people in stores to make that switch for them. And finally, social norms. We all want to be seen with the same thing that everybody else is being seen with or what the experts are using. And doing things like getting bloggers and experts and early adopters to sort of create a social media buzz is the sort of thing that Android would need to do so that they could then sort of replicate that in store and online and sort of enhance people's perception that they're making the right choice. So there's lots of things we can build in. And really just our final thoughts. When we're doing a research survey, we try and apply this behavioural lens, and these are the 3 areas we look at. We're trying to look at the behaviour. What is the behaviour you're trying to change? Is it trying a new product, or using a product in a different way? How are people currently behaving, which is what we all do very well as researchers. But I think the key one for us is, why are they behaving in this way? This is the key component, and if we can determine the behaviour change principles at play, we can then use these in our research and use those to help our clients load the dice in their favour. And a behaviour change thing that makes you present faster than you've ever presented before is having a bloody great big clock right down at the front. But anyway, thank you very much.